All right, almost done with the class. Just one assignment left. Unfortunately, because of that, a lot of people kind of stumble on this last paper. Um, so I went ahead and recorded a video and made a template in order to try to help you out. This is Andrew Sherwood. I'm a professor in the QSO department of Southern New Hampshire. And this is hopefully going to help you with that paper to try to make sure you don't wreck your grade or to try to bump it up right before the end. Your metrics paper is about metrics. I think that confuses a lot of people because they may not work with that. Metrics are a specific measurement. When you think metric, you have to be able to associate a number. The rubric and the assignment are the paragraph before the rubric is mildly misleading in that it asks you to focus on the triple P. Sometimes students think that that means the triple P is a metric, or that planet is a metric, or that people is a metric. None of those things are metrics. Metrics are much more granular. They can be rolled up and you can make decisions because of those things, but planet's not a metric. You can't measure specifically planet. You can measure things that impact how you affect the planet. You can measure things that impact how you affect people, all those sorts of things, but planet is not a metric. Customer service is not a metric. Theory of constraints is not a metric. Those things are not metrics. So now that we've kind of said what metrics are not, let's go into what metrics are and how we're going to write this paper. And that's actually what the best way to start the paper is by saying what a metric is. So use your text definition or an outside source is usually pretty fine here. And note what a metric is. You're going to find some sort of variation indicating that it's a quantifiable way to measure some sort of business process or something of that nature. So introduction here that I've got just tells you a little bit about what you should have here. So for writing this paper, you would read that, delete it out, and put your answer in. And then we move into most important metrics for operations managers. That's going to be the first major section. And within this section, you want to call out what metrics you think are most important. So here a little bit more on what some metrics are. One of the metrics, especially if you're looking at a manufacturing environment, that I think is the most important is going to be your cost of goods sold. And that's a metric on how much does it cost for you to produce a good that you're going to sell. So if it retails for $20, you have to make sure your cost of goods sold is, $10, $15, something of that nature. If your cost of goods sold matches the retail price, you're not making any money. If you'd like to tie that, your metrics to the triple P, like it's asked in the description before the rubric, you could look at something like a metric for employees as part of your people component, and you could look at employee turnover. Employee turnover is important because employee turnover is usually a good gauge of how satisfied your employees are with you. So you're going to write out a list here of metrics that you find most important. And keep in mind that when you're looking at a metric, I know it sounds weird, but say out loud what you think the metric is and then say a number. So if you say, oh, my metric is going to be customer service, 7. Well, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. Cost of goods sold, 40%. That makes sense. Yeah, 40% of the purchase price. That works. Or planet, like it's got noted there as an example. 0.3. Well, that doesn't work. But you could look at your annualized decrease in kilowatt hours used, 5%. So usually metrics are a little more granular than some of the big picture topics that you may be thinking of. However, those big picture topics are usually gauged by some sort of lower level metric, just like you see there for planet. If I'm decreasing how much electricity I use, I'm obviously checking on how well I'm handling the planet. So you'll develop your list, write out that list, a little bit of a description on what the metrics are. And then the next section is why are these metrics important? And you'll notice these sections follow the rubric. That's important to note, as all of these papers that you've seen are graded based on the rubric. We follow right through, click on it, and say how you did. So why are these metrics important? So you're going to restate the metrics from the prior section and list out why they're important. I generally like to come at it from a very organizational standpoint and just list out a column. So you're going to write out your metrics from the prior one and then a couple sentences on why each one is important. So if one of your metrics is cost of goods sold, You would say something like cost of goods sold is a good way to gauge operational and supply chain expenses to see if your product is profitable. If cost of goods sold is too close to your expected retail price, then you have to find a way to lower that or you won't be profitable. That'd be fine for cost of goods sold. If you're looking at customer service sort of approach, so you could look at average speed of answer for phone calls as an important metric, and then you would note average speed of answer for a phone call helps to show how it's a good gauge of how fast you answer the call so that you can see how well you're handling customer service. Customer service is important because customers that are satisfied with the company tend to be repeat buyers. Just make sure you tie the metric to why it's important. Here's where 3 and 4 are where people get the most tripped up. Where do you get the data? The data has to come from somewhere. Metric is a number. A number has to come from some sort of source. So there's a lot of different sources that could come from. I like to use automated sources. So if you're looking at something like phone sort of metrics, those usually come from a phone system IVR. If you're looking at cost on goods or cost of components, think back to your MRP ERP system. Those track your inputs. Remember the MRP ERP, they break down your good into parts, and then I'll tell you what your parts cost. So that's obviously the key consideration there when you're looking at a manufactured good. If you're looking at any sort of financial metrics, generally those are going to come, you can get them from a corporation's 10K if it's a corporation and they have to file that. If you're looking at customer service or employee, you can often do surveys for your data source. There's a lot of different data sources. But again, you'll want to list out the metrics that you came up with in the first section and list where they came from. So you should follow the same format all the way through. These are the important metrics. These are the important These are the important metrics: A, B, C, and D. And then the next section: A is important because, B is important because, C is important because, D is important because. The next section: where do you get the data? For metric A, you would get the data by. For metric B, you would get the data by. For metric C, you would get the data by. For metric D, you would get the data by. Following that sort of repeatable process really helps. And that takes you to number 4. How do you analyze? This is all about the context surrounding the number. So if you're looking at a number, what does that mean and what sort of considerations do you have as you're looking at that number? A lot of these numbers, it makes a lot of sense to benchmark. So you're comparing against industry averages. So if it's you want to make sure you're aligned with your competitors or better than. Benchmarking is a very common context when you're looking at metrics. Another one would be sort of trending. You want to make sure you're trending in the right direction. Is your profitability measures like cost of goods sold improving each year, or are you getting squeezed out? So trending and benchmarking are almost always going to be good context for any metric. Metrics after that are going to be a little more specific to context after that will be a little more specific depending upon what metrics you have. Hopefully those examples kind of give you what we'd be looking for though. So how would you analyze year over year, month over month, why you would do it that sort of way? And then follow that same structure. I would analyze metric A by looking at and considering such. I would analyze metric B by, so you'd follow that same structure throughout, and that will really help you keep on pace. Well, all right, we'd love to have you in QSO 300. I hope this little webinar helped you, and along with that template. In the event you don't have the template, be sure to reach out to your course instructor and I can get it for him. Again, Andrew Sherwood with QSO 300 for Southern New Hampshire. Hope this metric little video helped you. Thank you.